All right, are you ready to learn some sculpting for 3D printing? Today, we are going to be just going over the general kind of basic workflow for 3D sculpting. So, when you first open up Blender, it's going to have an option here for the new file for sculpting, but we don't want to do that because that's going to put us back in meters and everything will be out of, it's just not going to be in millimeters for you. So, make sure that you have your PTT starter file and you just do new file general, and you want to make sure you have your volume and your lights and everything set up. You're all in millimeters. And so when you're sculpting, really the main thing is you can really just use any mesh. Like we could sculpt the Suzanne, but let's kind of just hide her for a moment. And we're going to bring in something very simple like a cube. So just do Shift A and make a cube just like that. And let's make it maybe like 20 millimeters in size. That's pretty good. And so now we have just a basic piece of geometry. And so if we turn on wireframe, notice, it's just these, 6 faces that are just sitting out here, but we don't have enough geometry to actually do any sculpting. So say if we switched into sculpt mode, you could just drop down and click it here. Or what I like to do, and what I want you to get in the habit of, is doing Control Tab, and that will bring up this little pie menu and then just go down. So if you do it quick, it's Control Tab down, and that will flip you into sculpting mode. So now we are in sculpting mode because it says sculpt up here. We've got all of our brushes that you can see, and we're going to go over every single one of these in detail. And if you don't see some of these, it's because we are in Blender 2.92 alpha. So we're kind of in the early versions, but you should see most of these here. But really the only thing that you need to do when sculpting is go over to your modifiers and add geometry to this cube. So right now you can see it's very basic. It's just a few little points and lines. And if we try and sculpt on that, it's not really going to do much because, it barely moved, but it's not going to do much because we don't have any geometry. So to do that, we just go add modifier and we're going to use multi-resolution. And you may be asking, well, why don't we use subdivision surface like we've done in earlier things? This will kind of round out the object, but it won't let you sculpt. So subdivision won't let you sculpt. Multi-res will. So let's go ahead and click on multi-resolution. And this is just going to keep you very open and very flexible. So you have a few choices here. You can subdivide and kind of make it smooth, or you can use simple or linear subdivisions to keep this box shape. So say if we wanted to keep this box looking like a box, then we would do a linear or simple subdivision, which is going to give us this kind of look here. Or say if we deleted that and added a multi-resolution and use subdivide to add more geometry, notice it's going to make it more round and like a ball. So you can do this either way is totally fine, but really all I wanted to show you is the basic workflow. So now if we grab one of our brushes and draw, notice now we're getting what we want. We want some sculpt. You can also subdivide more and get even more detail. So that is just your basic workflow when doing sculpting. And when we go over all these brushes, we're actually going to use Suzanne just so you can kind of see, because I think it would just kind of be boring to just use a ball for sculpting every time. So just wanted to show you, you can do any geometry that you create in Blender. This is just a cube, but when we tab into edit mode, this is still the cube, but we've just added this multi-resolution sculpting kind of workflow on top of it. So let's do another example. So let's just hide this cube and let's do object mode. So let's add another shape, just another piece of geometry, maybe this icosphere here. And we can increase the size down here, maybe somewhere in like 10 for the radius. There we go. And so this is our base mesh, our base kind of box modeling. And then we can switch into sculpt mode with Control Tab down like that. And now we can add our multi-res, and it's just going to give us more resolution so we can start sculpting. So just do that, add our multi-res and subdivide. So notice we're getting this nice subdivision. We could go up to like 4 or 5. And now any brush that we grab will start to, add geometry. And then if we switch back into object mode, Control Tab over, notice we still have our base mesh, which is what we started with. And we can also crank up the level of viewport. So notice as we increase this level, it's going to show us our sculpture, underneath. But that's going to slow us down when we're using Boolean. So just keep it kind of low up here, and then you can, add your details. And we'll get into all this over the course, but I just wanted to show you kind of the basics of sculpting workflow in Blender when we're doing 3D print design. So that is the basics. For the next few lessons, we're going to just be focusing on Suzanne. So let's just turn off this icosphere and just go ahead and make sure you're in object mode and do Shift A, and let's add a monkey. And you can crank that up to maybe 20, somewhere in there. Yeah, that looks good. And now we've got a monkey. So again, in object mode, we have low resolution. We're not able to really sculpt on this. So we can just drop into sculpt mode, Control Tab down like that, and add our multi-res. There we go. And I'm going to make it smooth. So we'll just subdivide a few times, maybe 3 or 4 or 5 times. And there we go. So now we've got our very high dense mesh resolution, good for sculpting. So that is just a crash course overview just to kind of get you in the habit of just going into sculpt mode, adding the multi-resolution to any mesh that you want, and just click around some of these brushes and have some fun. So if you want to keep learning all these different brushes, there's so much to learn. I think you're going to be super excited. Let's go ahead and jump into the first lesson and start learning these brushes, learning what we got to work with. So I'll see you in the next video.